one of the obvious ones, as we alluded to when it came to the Somalians in COVID-19, was vitamin D3 deficiency. Vitamin D3 deficiency. I mean, we've screamed about this before the COVID came in, during the COVID, and after the COVID. We've been saying this. Please take your vitamin D. If you were to test your levels, it's about 25,000, I think, to test. So it's probably going to be expensive for most people, but you don't need to test it if you're Black. Even if you're living a middle income life, let's say you're middle class and above, you're most likely not going to be outside in the sun with your shirt off. So you're most likely going to be deficient in vitamin D. And if you live in the US or in the UK or in the Western world, where this summer is over and autumn or fall is here, going towards winter, you are almost definitely vitamin D deficient. So you just want to supplement with vitamin D. I always recommend between 5,000 and 10,000. I take multiple times that, and I've been doing that for many years. I'm still okay, but I do not recommend that for everyone. I just know it, and I've tested my vitamin D levels, and the vitamin D levels are really, really good. So you want to take vitamin D. We have found out that vitamin D is especially important for the brain as well. And so if you over 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, 60 years, 70 years, your vitamin D levels are low, it stands to reason that by the time you get into your 70s and 80s, that's cumulative effect of the deficiency of vitamin D is going to come back and bite you in the you know what. And so you're going to see weaknesses. Those weaknesses have built up over the years, and it's going to affect your brain function, your brain structure, your brain function, and so on and so forth. But that's an easy one. I wanted to just throw that one out first and foremost. The second reason we're seeing why Black people tend to have it worse when it comes to dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And as a quick reminder, dementia is a brain disorder in which long-term damage to the brain causes things like memory loss, defects in behavior, defects in social communication, and altogether just defects in brain function. So that's kind of like what dementia is, and there are different kinds of dementia. All right, so chronic disease is the other reason why people have dementia. And it seems like it's these same chronic diseases that we told you that Black people are more susceptible to. For instance, heart disease, hypertension, strokes. If you had multiple strokes in the past, it's a problem. If you have diabetes over a long period of time, the chances of you having dementia are so much greater. Even if you've had cancer that was treated, because of the use of chemotherapy and radiotherapy, those things can also cause repeated damage to the brain, which in your latter years can affect you. So chronic means a long term. Chronic disease is one of the topmost risk factors for dementia in your 70s and 80s. And I think you can understand that too. And then I'm going to take it a step further. I've mentioned insulin resistance in the past. We'll probably do an entire episode on insulin resistance. But insulin resistance is when your cells are not readily taking in glucose, or they're not readily responding to insulin, which allows you to take in glucose. So if your cells aren't taking in insulin, if they're not taking in glucose levels rise. But also the insulin levels rise because the body is thinking, or the pancreas is thinking, why aren't these cells responding to me? And so the pancreas continues to pump out more and more insulin. So again, your sugar levels are high, your insulin levels are high. The combination of these two things can be a big problem, but the insulin problem, some say is even worse than the sugar problem, believe it or not. And the brain especially has to respond to insulin. And the brain is not responding to insulin, which is a problem on its own. So it's a combination of high sugar levels and high insulin levels. Therefore, insulin resistance can lead to dementia. We're beginning to see that as well. So that's chronic disease as another factor. Now, here are two other factors that are not as emphasized, in my opinion, as they should be. And maybe it's because people want to be politically correct and they don't want to offend people. But we're finding out that your level of education, especially in the younger years, so they see that people who have had like 16 years of continuous education seem to be a lot more protected from dementia than those who probably never learned how to read well or never learned how to calculate math, who, in other words, have not had their brains tasked over and over and over again. Remember the old saying that says that use it or lose it? Well, it applies to the brain as well. It also applies to the body, obviously, and we're going to get to that. But the brain is like a muscle. It has to be exercised. It has to be stretched. It has to be tasked. And if you're not tasking the brain, especially in the younger years, your teenage years, your 20s, your 30s, when your brain is vibrant, it seems like that lack of vigor or rigor, that lack of rigor in the earlier years can leave your brain a little weaker in the future. Because one of the things that rigor and one of the things academics does, and reading and studying and thinking, is that it helps to form synapses, multiple connections between brain cells, kind of like in a forest. The trees kind of like have their root systems intertwined with each other. So even when there's a very, very strong wind or tornado or whatever it is, they are less likely to be to fall over because they are all supporting each other. Same thing with synapses. The more synapses there are, the more connections between brain cells, the more likely the brain is the more resilient, let's put it that way, the more resilient the brain will be. And we know that by studying and exercising the brain continuously throughout life, there is some level of protection. Obviously, there are many professors who have dementia, so it's not like it's a full complete protection. Now, let me tell you about the next one. The next one is physical activity. And the more rigorous the activity is, the better. Some people say just walking regularly is a really good protection. But we want to take it a step further. And we want to say that those who have strong muscles and who are exercising their muscles regularly, who are stretching their muscles, not just walking. Walking is important too. And that's why in the US, we're beginning to see in the US that even in these retirement homes, they have them push them to lift weights. I'm not saying they're going to be like the Arnold Schwarzenegger, but they're encouraging them to strain their muscles on a regular basis. Why is that important? Well, not only does it help to build stronger bones and stronger muscles, they are finding out that activity, that stretching and straining of the muscles releases certain chemicals from the muscles to the brain. They're called myokines, myokines. They're called myokines. These chemicals enter the bloodstream, they get to the brain, and they are helpful in stimulating memory, long-term memory, short-term memory, and also stimulating the formation of brain cells, also in stimulating the connection of brain cells, neurons between neurons. So it's really, really, really important.